So we're here with my friend, Andrew Stephenson, who is my former MP. And we've been friends for about 15 years, I think. 15 years, 14 years, something like that. Anyway, he didn't get much choice. But we won't go into that now. And Andrew has very kindly agreed to talk to us about what the job of an MP is, what an MP does, how to get hold of an MP, and things like that. So his proper name is the Right Honourable Andrew Stephenson, CBE. Why have you got Right Honourable? What how did that come about?
So long-serving MPs or any member of Parliament who's ever been in the cabinet are made members of the Privy Council, and if you're made a member of the Privy Council, that's an honour that you have for life, and it allows you to use the title of the Right Honourable for the rest of your life. So even though I'm no longer an MP, I will be the Right Honourable until the day I die, unless I do something very bad and I'm stripped of the title. But yes, so any member of Parliament who has the title Right Honourable, they don't all get it, but anyone who's serving in the cabinet or has served in the cabinet is the basic rule of thumb. Are referred to as Right Honourable.
Okay, so it's one of them English quirky things, isn't it? Those traditions that you either love or you hate. I love them.
Yeah.
So right. Okay. So MPs, some people are really, really confused. So, we have general elections, and I'm always banging on about what a general election is. I talk to my girl guides about it. I talk to people who are home educators about it. And I'm constantly, constantly saying, if you want to protect legislation or you want to change legislation or you want things to change on a national basis, and when we're talking about education, education's devolved. So we're only talking about England. And if you want to change education in Wales, you have to go to your member of the Welsh Assembly, or in Scotland to the Scottish Parliament, etc. So you have to go to the right person that represents you. But if you want to change things nationally with things like education, you have to go see your MP. You have to go and see your representative. So what is it? What's your job if you're an MP?
So it's quite a difficult job. It's a difficult job to explain because there's no job description for an MP. I would say the best way to think about it is to split it down into three different distinct roles which are overlapping. One is you are first and foremost a constituency representative. So you represent the area, and not just people who voted for you, but the area, the constituency that you are elected to represent. So I had the privilege of representing Pendle for 14 years. And it was my job to represent the 70-odd thousand people who live in that area. The average constituency now is about 76,000 voters, about 90,000 people. Obviously, country is divided up into 650 seats, 650 MPs. So first and foremost, your job is the constituency representative, representing local people, finding out their views, and then taking their views down to Westminster. House of Commons tend to sit Monday to Thursday each week. So Monday to Thursday, you're in London, you're representing the views of your constituents. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you're back in your constituency, finding out the views of your constituents. So that's the most important role. The second role is as a parliamentarian. Obviously, when MPs get together, the 650 MPs, we form the Parliament. The Parliament decides the laws of the land, where money is going to be spent, scrutinises pieces of legislation, which are bills that come before Parliament. And there's lots of select committees, there's lots of other bill committees, there's a whole range of work that needs to take place. Whether you're in government or opposition, everybody's involved in the legislative process. So the second role being the parliamentarian. And then the third role, virtually every MP. At the last election, there were a handful elected as independents, but virtually every MP is elected on a party ticket. And therefore, you have a role as a member of your party, ensuring that your party has the right ideas to either govern or hold the government to account, is putting forward an alternative agenda to government, is coming up with ideas for the manifesto for the next general election, and is generally advancing the cause of your party. So three distinct roles. They do overlap all the time, and some MPs spend a lot of their time doing the party political thing. Some MPs spend all of their time doing the kind of parliamentarian thing, and some MPs spend all the time focusing on the constituency. But probably the best MPs are the ones who balance those three distinct roles in a good balance.
Right. So if you've got an issue, so if you've got a personal issue, then obviously you're going to go and see your MP in his or her role as your representative in Parliament to take, because they can, an MP can use their weight, if you will, to ask other authorities to do things. So, for example, I mean, you've stepped in with housing issues and things like that for your local constituents and put your weight behind their woes, if you will, and their needs, and said, "Come on, guys, let's sort this out." That kind of thing, and sometimes that can have an effect. So I suppose educationally, you could go and talk to a school, write a letter to a school, write a letter to the local education authority, etc. But nationally, when we're looking at, for example, a couple of years ago, the schools bill was put before Parliament, and as you know, I fought tooth and nail to get rid of it. Um, but that's where I, as your constituent, could come and say, look, there's this piece of legislation that they're proposing that's a load of rubbish, and this is why. And that would be educating you as an MP so that you were informed when you were acting in your role as a parliamentarian. Yeah?
Exactly. So most MPs, most MPs have a few hobby horses which they want to speak on and they want to be involved in. But a lot of what is said in the House of Commons is driven directly by constituency interactions. Most MPs have a constituency surgery, tends to be on a weekend. You can book in to go and see your member of parliament. You explain to them what your concerns are, and then chances are in the next few weeks they might be standing up in the House of Commons speaking about that issue. They might table an early day motion, they might ask written parliamentary questions. There's a whole range of ways that they can raise your concerns. They could write to a minister about whatever you discuss with them. But that's again how the roles overlap. That constituency representative role, sitting there listening to the concerns of your constituents, and then that informing your work in Parliament.
That's brilliant. So I know things can be a bit different. So there's always a lot of complaints. Okay, so one of the complaints is, oh, they only do Parliament 4 days a week. Well, you've already explained that, because the other 3 days you're in the constituency listening to the concerns of your constituents. So you have to do both things. There's no point having the meeting if you then can't put the meeting into action or can't gather the information to have the meeting. And when the House of Commons is sitting, it's just a big meeting, isn't it? It's just a big meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing that people complain about is that they'll say, yeah, but he didn't speak up on my issue. Why does he never vote against the government, etc., etc.? So if you can just explain, and I know it's really complicated, explain in a nutshell the whip system as it affects every single MP, and then how actually being a member of the government, which means that you've got a job, not just MP, so you're a minister or you're a whip or whatever it is, how that affects how you can behave in the chamber.
Okay, I could probably do a 45-minute lecture on this, but I will try.
I know you can.
A kind of a very quick 3-minute summary. So the majority of MPs are elected on a party ticket. If you're elected on a party ticket, you've stood on a manifesto. Therefore, you were elected. I was elected to represent this area, the Pendle area, but I was also represented as a Conservative MP, taking that third role into account. I stood on a manifesto. First manifesto I stood on in 2010 included the creation of free schools, for example. Now, I stood on that manifesto. Therefore, when I arrived in Parliament, I was expected to vote for things that were in the manifesto. And the party whips would have encouraged me strongly to vote for things that were in the manifesto. However, if I had concerns about any of those proposals, either something that's in the manifesto or something not, but something put forward by my party, the whips are there to actually help facilitate a dialogue and to ensure that concerns are taken on board way before you get to a row or a vote in the chamber. So to take the free schools example, if I had had concerns about the creation of free schools, I would have mentioned that to my whip. My whip would have probably then arranged for me to sit down with the junior minister in any department, maybe the schools minister. The schools minister would have listened to me and heard my concerns out and said, well, it's in the manifesto, but I take your concerns. They might have then, he or she might have then referred me to the build team, the civil servants who are kind of drafting the legislation, and ensure that any concerns that you have, maybe safeguards were added into the draft bill, or various other things were done, concessions were made basically before it became a debate in the House of Commons. So you didn't have to speak against the bill. You didn't have to vote against the government. Good whipping is where those kind of concerns, particularly from a government MP, are taken account of really early on in the process. So it's a two-way dialogue. The whips need to understand the concerns of MPs. MPs need to be proactive in speaking to the whips about their concerns. And then it's about ensuring that legislation things are in the right place. I was part of a parliament from 2017 to 2019 when the government had kind of no working overall majority. Theresa May had no majority at the time. The whip's job was absolutely vital in ensuring the only votes that came up in Parliament were ones that the government could win. And that meant you had to get every backbench MP on board, every government backbench MP, before it came to the House of Commons. So you will have many MPs, many government MPs, who have never voted against the government. That's not to say that they are not influencing and shaping legislation. Some of them have a huge, probably a disproportionate amount of influence on shaping legislation, particularly in that situation where a government has a small majority. Where a government has a large majority, like the Labour government have now, power is somewhat more limited. However, still, a good whipping operation is listening to those concerns of backbench MPs, feeding them through and ensuring that they're taken account of really early on. So there isn't any visible divisions where MPs from the governing party end up having to speak or vote against a piece of legislation.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So what is it that an MP can't do? I mean, what kinds of things have people come to you and asked you to do that are outside your remit you just absolutely can't do anything about?
So there's very little that isn't in your remit. I mean, people come and ask you to investigate whether Father Christmas exists or various other things. And, there's certain things that you just, they are not in your remit. But most things are actually in the remit of government. So a whole range of kind of questions and things have been put to me over the years. Sometimes it will be things that I would decide to raise with a minister in writing. Sometimes it will be something that I discuss with colleagues because I'm not exactly sure how to take it forward. Sometimes it will lead to me directly drafting an amendment to a piece of legislation, putting forward an early day motion, or similarly, a 10-minute rule bill is another vehicle where you can raise the concerns of constituents and the need to change the law. When I was first elected, I was passionate about getting first aid into the school curriculum, and I worked as a part of an all-party parliamentary group, cross-party. A group of MPs came together, and we all agreed that first aid, basic first aid and CPR should be in the school curriculum. And we pushed and we pushed and we pushed. And after a few years, we managed to get the national curriculum changed in order to implement that. And that was a cross-party campaign. That was MPs working together. There wasn't always visible. We couldn't share with constituents to say, we wrote this letter this week, whatever. It was just every week, these MPs who shared this concern came together and just continued to push at every opportunity to ensure that the government was listening. And eventually the government did.
Okay. So yeah, so I've always said that it's really important to establish a relationship with your MP. And as you know, I mean, I've got a new MP and I've already been working really hard to establish a relationship with him and get his attention and all of that. I mean, how do you get an MP's attention? And please, no stories about you and me.
So the most important thing is to write or to go and speak to your MP directly, or to write to them in your own words. MPs receive hundreds of emails. When I was an MP, I think I was receiving around about 300 emails a day from constituents. There was then probably another 200 from lobbyists and other organisations, but about 300 from constituents. A lot of them are template emails. Christian Aid says, click here to tell your MP to lobby for 0.7% of GDI to be spent on international aid, or whatever it was, or WaterAid want you to do this, or the RSPB want you to protect grouse moors, or whatever the issue was. We receive hundreds of them, and by and large, they do not influence policy whatsoever. They make lobby groups feel very important, that they've had thousands of people email their MPs. They tick a big box, particularly for the big charities with lots of employees who are paid to do these kind of things, but they make bugger all, if you use the expression, but they make very little influence on MPs because we just ignore it, because by and large, it is people who have clicked something on the internet and it's emailed their MP. If somebody emails an MP using their own words, With a lot of MPs, that still actually ends up in front of the MP directly, because some of us, in my entire 14 years, I never handed over control of my own inbox. But even if an MP has handed over control of their inbox to, say, their office manager, if it's a particular interesting thing, if it's a different thing that hasn't come up before, the office manager or the caseworker is going to run it by the MP to say, how do you want us to address this? How do you want us to respond to this? So contacting an MP in your own words to express what the problem is or why you hold a view, saying, if you want to do go back to the example of Christian aid and how much we should be spending on international development. If you've got experience of international development and you've taken part in a project when you were a student or whatever, or done things or seen things on TV or whatever, if you write to the MP about that, that is going to carry so much more weight than a template email which has clearly been written by a lobbyist. So I would say contact your MP, regularly contact your MP. If you contact them and you don't hear back, contact them again and again and again, but also book into surgeries. But that's the thing. The most important thing is being unique, contacting them about what the problem is and how it makes you feel or how it impacts you or your family, rather than just signing petitions or sending template emails. Because, as I say, tens of thousands every year template emails will land in my inbox. I can rarely think of one that has actually influenced me in the way that I'm going to vote.
I mean, one of the things I always say to people is that particularly if you are going to be campaigning for a long time, if there's an issue that is going to come up again and again, and if you're a home educator, and we're talking mostly to home educators today, if you're a home educator, then there will be attacks on home education again and again and again. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. So it's really important, because you're part of a minority issue, to develop a relationship with your MP in order that he knows that you know about this stuff. He knows where to go if he wants more information, and you are a sensible person, person to have questions with. So I do know you and I in the past have had confidential meetings where we've just said, look, let's just go ask really stupid questions of each other and just not worry about it, just so that we can educate each other about whatever it is. And we've had that kind of relationship. I've also, when I've gone to see other MPs, I've done things like take them weird things that make them remind them of me. My most recent trick on Saturday was to tell my new MP, that he should have had his picture taken inside a dragon's mouth at the Dragon Festival. But we had a little joke about that, and that's a little thing that he will now attach to me, and he'll go, oh yeah, that's the woman that we had the conversation about. And it can be really useful if you have something a little bit quirky or something a little bit interesting or something really useful that they can, they see hundreds and hundreds of people, and if you can bring something interesting. And the other thing that's really, really important that I think really pushes it is telling stories. You tell your own personal story, how a piece of legislation is going to affect you, how it has affected you, how the attitude of government is currently affecting you. So, for example, if you have a child who is currently refusing school, you can't get them into school, etc., you could go to your MP and you could tell them the story of what's happened and how it's affected your family, and they can sort of get inside that story and they can buy into that story, and that will make them remember the important aspects of whatever you're talking about. I suppose you've had a few people come with stories and stuff, and that's really I do remember, actually, we had a nurse murdered, didn't we, from Barrowford. And that affected us all very, very deeply. And I know that as a result of that, we ended up with some movement led by you in the House of Commons.
Yeah, and again, that shows how all these roles overlap. I met the story is the nurse was called Jane Clough. She was murdered by an abusive ex-partner who she had plucked up the courage to speak to the police about rape and sexual assault. And then he tracked her down when he was on a judge had granted him bail. He tracked her down and killed her in Blackpool Victoria Hospital car park. Her parents, John and Penny Clough, came to my advice surgery after her murder, and they knew nothing I could do could bring Jane back. But what they were keen to do is to look at everything that had happened and see how we could improve the system to ensure that another tragedy like had happened to that family didn't happen again. And that led to me actually putting forward a bill in Parliament, the Bail Amendment Bill, to introduce a right of appeal against judge-made bail decisions. It was something we pushed and pushed and pushed. I got lots of kind of petitions and people backing it, and domestic violence charities backed it. And in the end, the government agreed, conceded, and brought forward their own amendment to a piece of legislation that was passing through the House of Commons. So there is now a right of appeal against judge-made bail decisions. That's one of the things that during my time in Parliament, just as a kind of backbench MP, because I wasn't a minister at the time, I pushed for that change. That came directly from a meeting at a constituency surgery. It took time. It took, that was from her murder to changing the law was at least 18 months. So that was a long running campaign. It was something I raised at Prime Minister's questions. It was something that, we tried all sorts of avenues in order to advance the cause. But it shows how the kind of constituency representative role and the parliamentarian role can quite often get blurred. If you effectively lobby your MP, they can become a real champion for you in Parliament.
Yeah, and that's what we want, folks. Okay, we want us to get our MPs. We've got 300 baby MPs in Parliament right now, and let's go grab them. Let's go educate them. Let's go explain to them how it is and how proposed legislation can affect us and how existing legislation's affecting us, and get them on side, and so that we have a relationship with them, so that going forward, if there are issues, if there are things that we want them to say, if the things that we want them to ask, so that they can. I mean, a lot of them are Labour MPs. Those Labour MPs are going to be backing the children wellbeing bill. That's the one that we're going to fight next. And they need to be educated about it now. They need to know what the problems with it are right now. Start that relationship, go back again and again and again, with more information, explaining, answering questions, being polite, being nice, being kind, understanding that your new MP might not necessarily know what the process is yet, but take your story to them. They're eager to help. I do remember Andrew was an eager young chap in 2010.
Great.
Yeah, he's gone grey since, definitely. But that's the way it goes. Well, thank you, Andrew. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. Thank you so much for just leaping in on this.